fun. Steve was fun. He taught me that it's okay to play in the rain.
The Crocodile Hunter's son grew up under a microscope, and the world assumed he would be just like his father. On the October 2025 dedication night episode of Dancing with the Stars, 22-year-old Robert Irwin dedicated his performance to his mother, Terri Irwin, the woman who held their family together after Steve Irwin's shocking death. But Robert's transformation wasn't just about talent or fame. It was shaped by a childhood the cameras never showed. So what really happened to Robert behind the headlines? And how did Terri guide her children under the weight of a global spotlight? Join us as we reveal the emotional journey behind Terri Irwin's son's transformation. The boy who grew up watching his own dad on television.
So you can see how nice and gentle it is for her there. We're able to jump in, get her on the grass so it's nice and soft.
Robert Irwin has talked about his grief with a clarity that is remarkable for someone who experienced the loss at such a young age that the memories themselves are almost inaccessible. He was 2 years and 9 months old when Steve died. He knows intellectually what was lost. He can describe in detail who his father was. What he cannot fully access is the sensory memory of the man himself, the weight of being held, the sound of a voice in a room, the specific physical presence of a father that older siblings and parents carry in their bodies even after the person is gone. That is the fear that kept him up at night. Not that he would miss Steve, but that he would forget what Steve felt like. And the person he credits with preventing that is his mother, who he has said gave him the clearest picture of who his father actually was. He grew up watching his father on television the way the rest of the world did, using archive footage to fill in the gaps that his own memory could not provide, walking around Australia's zoo and feeling Steve's presence in everything the place was built to be, while simultaneously feeling the impossible emptiness of him not being there. Terri Irwin raised 2 children whose primary model for how to survive loss was watching her survive it. The transformation did not happen in a gym or in a dance studio or on the set of a Bonds underwear campaign. It happened over 22 years, in the wake of a catastrophe, in the care of a woman who chose, every single day, to make sure her children knew who their father was. To understand what Robert has become, and why Terri's tears watching him on that dance floor carry the weight they carry, you have to understand what Terri has been carrying since September 4th, 2006, and how she carried it without letting it crush everything underneath it. What Terri has been living with. Steve Irwin died at 44 years old, which is an age at which most men believe they are still building rather than finishing. He had told Terri, years before it happened, that he had a sense of his own mortality. He had watched his mother die in a car accident and told Terri afterward that he felt something similar was coming for him. And she had learned to change the subject when he said it because there was nothing useful to say back to someone who was right. On the morning of September 4th, 2006, he was filming an underwater sequence for a documentary when a short-tailed stingray barb penetrated his chest and struck his heart. He died almost immediately. He was in the Great Barrier Reef, doing what he had done his entire professional life. And then he was gone. Terri was in Tasmania when she got the call. She was on a hiking trip with a guide, away from communication, and when the message finally reached her, she had to get back to Queensland, back to her children, back to Australia's zoo, and back to a public life that had been defined entirely by the partnership she had just lost. She has described the immediate aftermath as something she moved through on autopilot, held together by her faith and by the practical necessity of being present for Bindi and Robert. Bindi was 8, Robert was not yet 3. There was no space to come apart completely because 2 children were watching to learn how to respond to the worst thing that had ever happened to their family. Nearly 20 years later, she was still describing grief in language that had not softened into easy acceptance. On the Wiggle Talk podcast in September 2024, she said, "When they say time heals all wounds, it doesn't. But eventually it changes it, and it walks next to you. It's always there, and you have to acknowledge your grief, but it's a companion rather than an all-consuming feeling." That is the description of someone who has not moved past something, but has learned to carry it with more skill than they had at the beginning. She has said in multiple interviews that she considers herself to have had her happily ever after. That she is lonely for Steve, but she is not a lonely person. That she could not imagine another Steve Irwin and has no interest in trying to find one. The Nightly's full interview with Terri about her grief, Robert's transformation, and life approaching 20 years after Steve's death revealed everything. The woman who sat in the audience at Dancing with the Stars and cried watching her son has been choosing every morning since September 4th, 2006, to absorb rather than deflect the weight of what she lost. She has also run Australia Zoo, a 500-employee operation that Steve built, and that Terri has kept not just alive, but genuinely thriving in the nearly 2 decades since his death. She has continued the Wildlife Warriors nonprofit. She became an Australian citizen in 2009. She has watched her daughter Bindi go through years of undiagnosed endometriosis and then a ruptured appendix in May 2025 that required a long, complicated surgery to repair both conditions simultaneously. 14 endometriosis lesions removed alongside the appendix. Bindi posting from a hospital bed describing the recovery. Terri was there. She has navigated a painful estrangement from Steve's father, Bob, who cut contact with his grandchildren and returned gifts they sent him. A wound that sources say Bindi has been quietly trying to heal, even as Terri has reportedly resisted. She has done all of it without a partner and without her anchor, and without ever showing her children anything other than what it looks like to keep going, when going is the only option that does not hurt everyone around you. Robert watched all of that. He absorbed the lesson long before he was old enough to articulate what the lesson was. And the man he became, the one who stood on a dance floor in Los Angeles in October 2025 and made his mother cry with pride, is a direct product of what she modeled for him in the years when modeling was the hardest. The transformation nobody expected. The thing about Robert Irwin is that the world made up its mind about who he was going to be before he had any say in the matter. He was the Crocodile Hunter's son, the baby who had been held over the crocodile enclosure, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed toddler who appeared on Steve's television specials, the little boy who grew up on camera at Australia Zoo and who, by the time he was a teenager, looked so much like his father that the resemblance itself had become a story. The world had written a very specific script for Robert Irwin, and it did not include a Bonds underwear campaign or a Dancing with the Stars trophy, or an I'm a Celebrity hosting gig, or a TikTok following that has made him one of the most followed young Australians on the platform. The physical transformation that sent the internet into a spiral in April 2025 was real, and the response to it was predictable. He had been photographed for a Bonds underwear campaign, shirtless, visibly athletic, holding a snake, and looking nothing at all like the safe, wholesome wildlife presenter most people had filed him under. The internet noticed. His social media following surged. Terri, asked about it in an interview with The Nightly shortly afterward, said she had mixed feelings. She pointed out that Steve had not attracted that kind of attention until he was 30 and already famous. and had once said he was glad he and Terri had met before the Crocodile Hunter fame, because he could be certain she loved him for who he was rather than what he represented. Terri said she was glad for Robert to have flattering attention. She also said it was a lot, but the transformation that genuinely moved her, the one that produced the tears at Dancing with the Stars, was not the physical one.
Come stop your crying, it will be alright. Just take my hand, hold it tight.
It was watching her son stand on a national television stage and use dance to say something true about grief and family and survival that words alone could not have carried. He had become emotional during rehearsals when old footage of Steve played on a monitor in the studio. He danced to a Phil Collins song that had been playing in his family's orbit since before he was old enough to understand what it meant. He dedicated the performance explicitly to his mother, writing on social media beforehand that she exemplifies how to be strong, that she is kind and vulnerable and steadfast, and teaches him every day what it is to put one foot in front of the other, even when it is so hard to do that. And he dedicated it, without naming him, to his father, because a son who grew up watching his father on television and learning his father's face from archive footage has a relationship with grief that comes out in art before it comes out in conversation. The dance floor was the place he could say what he could not fully say anywhere else. The judges gave the performance the highest score of the season. Robert and Whitney Carson went on to win Dancing with the Stars Season 34 in November 2025, making Robert the second consecutive Australian to win the US version of the competition. He then flew directly to South Africa to begin filming the 2026 season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which he co-hosts. He had 2 heartbreaks in the space of roughly a year, splitting from Rory Bucky in February 2024 after 18 months together, and from Charlotte Briggs in early 2025 after a shorter relationship that never fully went public. He told People magazine in September 2025 that he was single, open, and waiting for the stars to align. He pointed out that both his parents and his sister and her husband Chandler Powell had all met their partners at Australia Zoo, and that he was waiting for his own American tourist to walk through the gates. He said his parents were his role models in everything, including the relationship department, and that the goal was 2 people living side by side, smashing life together with mutual admiration and respect. That description of what he is looking for, borrowed from watching his parents together and watching his mother navigate the aftermath of losing that partnership, tells you the most important thing about who Robert Irwin has become. He is not haunted by what happened to his family. He is shaped by it. There is a difference, and Terri Irwin is the reason the difference exists. What Terri built after the worst day. The public narrative around Terri Irwin has, for nearly 20 years, centered on what she lost. That is understandable and also insufficient. What she built in the years after September 4th, 2006, is the more complete and more accurate story of who she is. She took over a wildlife park that her husband had made internationally famous and made it bigger, expanding to over 500 employees and continuing the conservation work that Steve had always treated as the actual point of fame rather than the other way around. She raised 2 children who are, by any measure, genuinely extraordinary. A daughter who went public with her endometriosis battle and became one of the most recognized advocates for women's reproductive health in Australia, and a son who won a national dance competition, hosts a reality television show, ran a viral underwear campaign, and describes his late father as his superhero, while conducting himself in a way that suggests he absorbed every lesson his mother ever tried to teach him. None of that happened by accident. All of it happened because Terri Irwin chose, after the stingray Barb took her husband, to keep going, in a way that gave her children something to grow toward rather than something to collapse under. She has said that being famous for losing Steve means she never has to explain to anyone what happened, that the public already knows removes the exhausting work of disclosure in every new conversation. She has also said that time does not heal the wound, but it changes the wound, and that eventually you find a way to carry it that does not require you to stop. The 20 years of evidence of what she has built with that philosophy are visible in everything around her. The zoo with its 500 staff, the conservation work, the children, and the grandchild Grace, who calls Steve Grandpa Crocodile and watches his documentaries and knows who he was because Terri made sure she would. Grace is 4 years old. Her grandfather died 17 years before she was born. She loves him because someone made the effort to make that possible, and that someone was Terri, doing in the next generation what she had done for Bindi and Robert in the one before. The memorial to Steve Irwin is not a plaque at Australia Zoo. It is a 4-year-old girl who knows the word crocodile and the man who made that word his life. The rumors about Terri and Russell Crowe that have circulated for decades have never had any basis in reality beyond a long and genuine friendship that, according to a 2025 source cited by New Idea, had actually gone quiet after Crowe began a new relationship in 2020. A loss that Terri reportedly found difficult, even though the friendship was platonic. Terri herself, in a 2024 interview with Us Weekly, said nothing but warm things about Crowe. She has addressed the broader remarriage speculation with a humor that suggests someone who is not threatened by it because she knows exactly who she is. She has said she could not imagine another Steve Irwin. She has said she will never remarry. She has said she is lonely for Steve, but not a lonely person. She has said she already got her happy ending and that she is comfortable with the person she sees in the mirror. That is not a performance of contentment. That is someone who did the actual work of processing something enormous and came out the other side with a clear and honest picture of themselves. At Dancing with the Stars in October 2025, sitting in the audience watching her son move across a stage to a song about not being left behind, Terri Irwin cried. She had been crying, in various forms and at various intervals, since September 4, 2006. But those tears were different from the ones that came immediately after the stingray, and the phone call in Tasmania, and the flight back to Queensland, and the years of mournings that came after. Those tears were the kind that come when you find out that something you sacrificed everything to build has actually worked. Her son was 22 years old, standing in a spotlight on national television, telling the world what his mother meant to him, and the answer he gave was everything she had spent 20 years trying to be for him. The tragic transformation of Robert Irwin is not tragic in the way the headlines imply. It is tragic in the original sense. It cost something real. It required something enormous, and it produced something that would not have existed without the loss that preceded it. What do you think is the most remarkable thing about how Terri raised Robert and Bindi after losing Steve? And do you think Robert understands yet how much of who he is came directly from her? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.